Hello everyone and welcome to the British Birthing Stories podcast. Each week I'll be speaking with a different mother about her story of childbirth. Let's get into today's story. Before we get into today's story, I just want to say a really big thank you to everyone who has followed the show on whatever podcasting app you're on, or if you've followed us on social, it really means the world. If you haven't done so already and you're loving what we're doing, then it would be great if you could please give us a follow on social at British Birthing Stories, or leave us a review on your podcasting app, or better yet, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you have a birth story that you'd like to share, I really do want to hear it. I'm open to all kinds of birth stories, or even if you know of someone who's got a great birth story that you think should be shared on the podcast, please do send it in. I'm really hoping to form a great resource for women with every kind of birth. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be bad. Literally, whatever you think needs to be out there, I want to hear it. So you can do so via my contact form on my website, which is britishbirthingstories.com, or simply through one of my social media channels like Instagram or TikTok. You can find me at British Birthing Stories. In today's episode, we're joined by Hannah, who shares her 2 NHS home births. Hannah talks really openly about what it was like conceiving her first baby during the pandemic and having a home birth during that time, and then also having to navigate late induction pressure and really wanting that home birth still, and ultimately achieving her home birth. She had 2 beautiful water births, and she experienced a wonderful physiological birth with the fetal ejection reflex. This is a really good episode for anyone who is navigating, trying to book a home birth and really, really wants it. Hannah just shows that if you have perseverance and resilience, you really can have the birth that you'd like to have. So I'll hand over to Hannah now. Hi Hannah, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to start off by telling me a little bit about yourself and who's in your family?
Absolutely. So I'm Hannah. I live in Somerset with my husband and 2 boys. My eldest is 4 and my youngest is 18 months.
I want to start off today by telling me about your first birth story, and then if we have time, we'll get into your second.
Yeah, absolutely. So we fell pregnant with our eldest in kind of between the 2 lockdowns in the summer of 2020. And he was then born in April 2021 at home. We were supported by the NHS trust, which we lived near, and they had a home birth team which supported us, which was great. And so, yeah, a fairly textbook birth by a lot of standards. We were able to stay at home. I had a pool, which I was in for about 25 minutes. Would have loved to be in for a bit longer. Yeah, that's kind of it in summary, but happy to go into any detail as is useful, really.
Yeah, of course. So do you want to start by telling me, what was your journey to conception with your first son like? Were you planning to conceive when you did?
Yes, we were. Yeah, we'd been married for 9 years this year, and we'd kind of always wanted kids, and it kind of felt right about the right time. COVID then hit, and we were like, oh, do we, don't we, and decided that, life needed to continue, really. So quite lucky, had quite a straightforward journey to conception and very much planned. Yeah.
Lovely. And then what were your thoughts on birth as you went into your first birth with your first son? Did you have any ideals of how you wanted to go, what it would be like?
Yeah, I think it was something I did quite a lot of reading and research about kind of around the time we started trying to conceive in an early pregnancy. I'm very much like a reader and a researcher. I like to kind of understand the space. I was also working for a organisation which worked in women's healthcare and in international development at the time, so kind of had some understanding from that. But I think a lot of what we're shown is quite unrealistic. So I was really keen to kind of understand myself what birth was like and what my options were, and quite quickly decided that I wanted to explore home birth. So that was really supported by a midwife who I saw at my kind of 8-week registration appointment, and I was very quickly then put under the home birth team, which really sort of shaped how the pregnancy progressed in a lot of ways.
So your first son was born in 2021, so that was after COVID, and you were able to get a NHS home birth team. So can you talk us through that process of what that was like, and whether or not you were happy with it and things like that?
Yeah, so the first sort of set of appointments I had to attend completely by myself because of COVID, but I saw a lovely midwife who, as soon as I mentioned, had been doing a bit of reading about home birth, was like, oh, we have a home birth team, let me put you in touch with them. And she actually said it's always really good, even if you're not sure, to sort of go under the home birth team, because it gives you that continuity, because you see the same midwife every time. And that, but you'll be able to have the type of conversations which might more align with the type of birth you're talking about with the home birth team. So I was really well supported from early on. I had the same midwife at every appointment, which was just fantastic. And I think a really big reason why I was able to make a lot of the decisions I was sort of having to make towards the end of the pregnancy. And yeah, I think part of it was being in a bigger trust. So we were under Frimley Park Hospital with my first pregnancy. So they had this kind of dedicated resource, and it was, can't really fault it.
Yeah, wow. What was your pregnancy like with your first son? How were you feeling? Symptoms, things like that?
Yeah, generally really excited. I had some sickness in the first trimester, kind of not multiple times a day, but most days I was being sick, but it wasn't kind of it wasn't too horrendous compared to how I know it can be for some people.
Yeah.
I think the thing I found hardest was the tiredness. I was like absolutely exhausted, falling asleep on the sofa at 5 o'clock every day. It was odd with it being COVID. So I spent a lot of time by myself at home because my husband was working out of the home. I was working from home. And so I think that was a blessing in terms of the tiredness, and it meant that I could like do yoga and go for my daily walk and stuff like that, but also quite isolating. So I think sometimes I got a bit in my head about the thing. But generally, it was a really positive sort of experience.
Great. And then can you talk us through your first signs of labour with him?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a false start about a week before he was born, which was kind of Braxton Hicks, which had been rumbling away for a little while, sort of intensifying, and I guess getting into what I felt was a pattern. And my lovely home birth midwife came out and saw us and was like, feels like things are happening but still really early. Hopefully I'll see you later today, but like give us a call back if things intensify. And then they didn't. But it was, I think it would be fair to say I was uncomfortable over the next few days, but nothing kind of established back into a rhythm. I think actually what happened was I was sick, and that stopped all of the regular contractions. And then the day before he was born, we went in for a scan. So I'd been having fairly regular scans because I was measuring small. So there was nothing wrong with me or baby, but baby was measuring below 10th centile. So we were encouraged to have regular scans, and received really conflicting advice from the consultants about what that then meant in terms of risks and how they'd want to manage us. And we kind of annoyingly saw a different consultant every time. But yeah, on that Thursday, I was feeling really uncomfortable. We went in for what we thought or hoped would be a case of scan, baby's growing, continue as you are. Scan, baby's growing, but consultant was saying, actually, I think we should induce you. So we were like, oh, not really what we would choose, particularly as there's no concerns for baby or me at this stage. And I had a midwife appointment the next day. So I was like, we're going to go home. I'm going to speak to my midwife. And then if we want to take you up on the induction, we'll call you back. And then that evening, having had kind of tried to have a really nice evening together and remove the stress from the hospital day, I then went into labour, and it was from about 3 a.m. really regular contractions, but the first kind of 10 or 12 hours they were quite manageable. So although like sort of I was getting 3 and 10 for most of that time, I was able to kind of watch a movie and chat and eat a little bit and have a shower and things like that. So that first sort of 10, 12 hours of my labour, I would say, was fairly what I was expecting in terms of early labour.
So then this was a planned home birth. So so whilst you're labouring at home, have you called the home birth midwives at this point, or where was your head with that?
So what they advise is like at the earliest signs to kind of let them know. So that's what we did. So I think I started around 3 a.m. and by like sort of 6, 7, I was like, no, like this feels kind of fairly consistent. So I rang them and I was like, I feel fine. I don't feel like I need you at this stage, but just to let you know, I think things are happening. I think one of the challenges we had is there was a few times I was like, I'd really like the midwife to come now, sort of later on in the evening, and they didn't, because they spoke to me and said, oh, it sounds like you're doing okay. So they didn't actually come till quite late.
Gotcha.
Labour, which was a challenge, but they were kind of always there at the end of the phone.
So then we haven't discussed your birth prep, so just really quickly, because obviously the first 10 hours of labour can be challenging, especially if you're like a first time mum and you haven't done it before, and you seem that you were really calm and collected person about it. So what did you do to prep for that, and how was your house geared up to support you?
Yeah, so as I said, I did like lots of reading. We did the Positive Birth Company online course because we couldn't access like any in-person support, and we also did Bump and Baby online. So they were kind of like online content which we
Yeah.
watched. The Bump and Baby one was interactive with other families, and I guess very kind of general, no kind of preferences one way or the other, which was really great to have that understanding of the kind of full options available to women in the UK when it comes to birth.
Yeah.
The Positive Birth Co was, I guess, a lot more focused around less intervention and how, like, what tools and techniques, and hypnobirthing, which I found really helpful,
Yeah.
was kind of a key tool there. And we did lots of kind of practice, my husband and I, around hypnobirthing and how he could support me and things. And yeah, so that's kind of the prep we did, which I think, again, lockdown enabled us to do quite a lot. We certainly didn't do that much with our second. And I think if it hadn't been lockdown, it would have been more challenging to spend those kind of hours reading and doing videos and stuff. But that was a benefit. And then in terms of the house, I had a yoga ball, we had a pool, but the pool didn't go up till quite late. I used the bath and the shower quite a lot. I used kind of nice smells like oils and candles and stuff, and music. And I guess the biggest thing the prep encouraged me to think about was like what things made me feel comfortable, and like that oxytocin they talk about. So like I watched The Sound of Music in the morning, and it was those things. It was thinking about like, what do I, having those cozy blankets, what things make me feel comfortable, my smells, my home. But I think one of the things which attracted me to home birth was the idea that it was familiar. So we didn't like go overboard or kind of create this like special space. I just kind of wanted to be in our home.
Yeah. Nice. So you got to the kind of 10-hour mark. At what point did you feel like things were starting to change?
So, around the 10-hour mark, I was like, I am struggling to kind of sit still through the contractions, starting to kind of having to really focus on my breathing. So midwife came out and was like, yeah, you're not quite 4 yet, seems to be coping really well. And she went away. And then over the next couple of hours, things kind of really ramped up. So I was like to my husband, I'd really like the midwife to come now. I'd like to get in the pool. This was probably like sort of 7:30 in the evening. Starting to feel a bit tired. And I spoke to the midwife on the phone, and she kind of said, look, it sounds like you're doing really well. Why don't you try again? Because what we know is if you're in early labour, getting in the bath can kind of slow things down. And if you're not in early labour, it won't make any difference. But it sounds like it's too early for you to get in the pool. So I got in the bath, and things definitely did not slow down. Things like ramped up even more. I was like getting quite uncomfortable because I couldn't move as much as I wanted to in the bath. And so I was like, no, we need the midwife, we need the pool. Let's let this is happening. And I think over the next couple of hours, I really started to struggle. I remember saying a few times, like, I can't do this. And it took the midwife quite a long time to come out. My husband was kind of downstairs setting up the pool. I was kind of upstairs going, oh, it's too late for the pool and I'm not sure what's happening. And like, I think, as you say, like, as a first time mum, you can read about it, but experiencing it is different. And I think, I was in the kind of latter ends of labour at that point, we now know. I remember when the midwife kind of finally arrived about an hour before our son was born, I looked at her and she kind of was just really calm and sat and looking at me, and I went, you don't think I'm in labour, do you? Because I was like, if this isn't it, then I can't do it, kind of thing. So yeah, it was kind of, that evening bit was more challenging because I felt like I needed almost that external validation of someone saying, yes, you're in labour, to like keep going. So yeah.
So then what was your first sign, I guess, of transition? How did you mentioned a few times having that kind of crisis of confidence, but talk us through the actual birthing of him.
Yeah, so my waters broke and I was sick, and I was kind of having this crisis of confidence all around kind of, I guess, 11 o'clock, and the midwife arrived around 20 past, 11:30. So I think I kind of had transition, and then I almost had this pause. So the contractions got really, really intense. I was really struggling to breathe through them. Then I was sick, my waters broke, and the contractions were still there, but they'd really changed and they didn't. So I think that was probably my transition. And then the midwife arrived, and she was really lovely, and she kind of was just encouraging me to listen to my body. And I think my body almost gave me a bit of a rest before the pushing started, or maybe I felt much safer once the midwife had arrived to kind of transition into that pushing stage. But for me, that pushing stage was like very undeniable, wasn't like effort, it was like very involuntary. Like I'd almost describe it like being sick, like, you know, that thing where you couldn't stop yourself being sick if you don't. I couldn't like stop pushing even if I wanted to. So I somehow made it from upstairs downstairs into the pool, and that's a bit of a blur how that happened. But that happened, and I was in the pool for about 25 minutes pushing, and he was born at half midnight basically.
Wow.
So the actual pushing bit felt like a relief. I think it felt for me like really productive, really like involuntary, as I say. It wasn't like as uncomfortable as the contractions, although crowning, I remember being quite uncomfortable. And then he came really quickly. So his head was out, and then I put my hand down to touch his head, and he like wriggled out without a contraction. And he was in like this Superman position with his arms up, and I like picked him up and put him straight into my chest. So that was, yes. So that was like a really special, like magical moment, like him actually, you know, coming and me being the first person to pick him up. And that's really what I'd hoped for, I guess, is that bit for me to be able to do and to remember, and yeah, all of those things.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like you experienced a fetal ejection reflex.
Yeah, I would guess so. Yeah.
That total, like, where you are not even trying, which is just incredible. I would love to experience that. So he comes out, you grab him. Did you know the gender?
Yeah, we knew he was a boy.
Lovely.
And so that was kind of confirmed. They said, yes, he is quite small, but he looks perfectly healthy and formed, and he cried and did all the things you would want him to do. So then we didn't spend as long as we might have in the pool, because the pool hadn't been up for very long. We couldn't get it to like the right temperature. And I was like shaking, I think, like from the adrenaline and like how quick that last bit had been. Exactly. So I couldn't stop shaking. The pool wasn't quite the right temperature. So we got out after about 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah. So once he'd come out, also I didn't ask you, or maybe you said, what gestation was he when he was born?
He was 39 plus 3.
Nice. And then do you know what, obviously he got weighed, I assume, at home?
Yeah.
What did he weigh?
6 pounds.
Okay, so he was, I mean, smaller, but not like, not crazy small.
Not crazy small. And my husband, who is now 6'4", was like 5 pounds when he was born. And I was only 6.5 pounds when I was born. So it wasn't like a massive shock to the family, I suppose. Although in the medical system, they were like, oh, this is like lower than 10th percentile. So
yeah, and they like to scare us sometimes, don't they?
Yeah.
So how long did it take for your placenta to come out? What was that like?
Yeah, so as I said, I had these really strong shakes, and so quite quickly when I got out, they offered me the injection, which I decided to accept because I was tired and shaking and just kind of wanted it all over. And then when I had the injection, I actually really don't remember the placenta coming. It came really easily after the injection. So it was only about 20 minutes after the birth, I think. But yeah, I had the injection.
Did you take a look at it? Obviously.
A little bit, yeah. Again, with the second, it was one of the things I really wanted to spend a bit more time looking at, because in the blur of everything, I don't have like very strong memories of it from the first.
And then what was that kind of golden time with your son like? How were you post-birth? Did you have any stitches that you needed? Like, how were you feeling? What was that kind of, first few hours like?
Yeah, so they left us alone for a little bit, and I was able to have to start to feed him, which was good. And they did an examination. I did have quite a bad tear, probably because of how he was born and the speed. So there was 2 midwives, and they were kind of discussing transfer versus doing it at home. Quite hilariously, my husband had to go get his DIY big bright light for them to have a proper look, because at home you don't have proper light. So that's quite a comical moment. But I had a really good midwife, and she looked at me and she said, look, I'm confident I can do this. This is borderline for transfer, but if you want to stay at home, I have confidence, you're fine. But if you want to transfer, absolutely we can. So it was I really appreciated the tone of that conversation. So we decided that if she had any concerns at any stage, we would transfer. But if she was confident to start, we would try at home. And she was able to stitch me at home, which was wonderful, because then I could go to bed, basically.
Great. Did they give you, I assume, some kind of numbing?
Yes. Me an injection at site for numbing, and then Gassinet. So I hadn't had gas and air for the birth. They gave me gas and air at about 10 past, quarter past. And I remember taking one puff and throwing it at my husband. I think I was just far too late and couldn't, like having used it for the stitches, it's that thing where you get into a rhythm and breathing, and I was just too far gone in labour, I think, by the time it got to me. But anyway, it's brilliant for the stitching.
It's a good time when you need it.
I was very glad that was there.
So then how did your breastfeeding journey go with him?
So overall I fed him for over 2 years.
Lovely.
So I got support at the sort of in my afterbirth period, and I think, when you have a home birth, you have 2 midwives just in your home for you, so that was like a real bonus. And then it's not easy. There were definitely points where it was painful. It really meant not a lot of sleep. I had mastitis a few times, but we didn't have any issues with kind of latch or anything like that. So I think it was challenging but positive, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then how were you feeling? How was your postpartum? Did you have any kind of, I suppose, like, how were you feeling day 4? That can be a really challenging time.
Yeah, I remember my milk coming in and like the relief and the kind of, I think I'd almost been like holding on for that. And that was like a very emotional day. But I think generally I felt quite positive. I think so the way the COVID restriction worked at the point he was born, my mum was allowed to come once he was born because you're allowed a support bubble. All of this stuff you just forget happened, right? But so my mum was allowed to come when he was born because you're allowed a support bubble. But before that, we only were allowed to see her outside. So I remember like my mum arriving and it just being like really exciting and happy to have her in our house, because we hadn't for like 18 months because of COVID. And she stayed with us for a few days, which was amazing because it meant that we kind of just, my husband and I just focused on our son, and she did lots of like cooking and washing and like really nourished me and looked after me. And I think that massively helped. And then my husband had 4 weeks off, and then as he was going back to work, all of the lockdown restrictions lifted. So there was still kind of masks and restrictions and stuff, but I was able to get out and about a bit more. And I think that really helped as well, going for walks with friends and going to kind of quite small mum and baby groups. And I enjoyed that as well.
Oh, that's so lovely. So shall we get into your second birth then?
Okay, yeah.
Fantastic. So can you talk us through your journey to conceiving your second son? Was he planned, and did you need to conceive when you did?
Yes, he was very much planned and a very quick conception. We actually decided we were going to wait till after my sister had got married, because I was married, and we were pregnant the next month after she got married. So it kind of we'd always known we'd wanted more than one. I'd been fairly confident I didn't want 2 under 2. So we kind of hadn't like planned much more beyond that, but then sort of trickled into place there.
And then how did you start to feel at the beginning of that pregnancy? Was it similar to your previous pregnancy? Were you feeling really unwell, or?
It was fairly similar, and the exhaustion was much worse. And I think, we now know that I had low iron.
Okay.
And I think probably that was from breastfeeding for so long and probably not re-nourishing myself as well as I should have in between. But also, obviously, we weren't in lockdown, so I was working and out the house a lot more, and I had a 3-year-old to look after. So the exhaustion was really tough second time around. I wasn't actually sick as much. I was sick a little bit, but not as much. But the exhaustion was tough. But again, by second trimester, it was fine. And then the rest of the pregnancy was quite smooth. And they did put us under a consultant initially because Archie had been small, but my youngest never measured small. So we were discharged from the consultant and midwife led throughout.
Nice. And then were you hoping to have a home birth with your second as well?
Yeah, we absolutely were. And I think it's different emotionally, like when you're thinking about what your preferences are for your second birth, because you know so much more. But I think you also realise the pros and cons in a different way. So I think I remember saying to one of the midwives that for me, it was as much about after the birth, having the home birth, as the birth itself. I felt that actually I could have a really positive experience in a midwife-led birth centre and at home. But after the birth, the idea of being anywhere other than home was actually like a bigger thing for me second time round, actually.
So you wanted to be at home even more?
I think so, yeah.
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 Yeah. So then were you able to get NHS midwives again to
We
do a home
were,
birth?
we moved, so we were under a different trust and a different system, and there wasn't a dedicated home birth team. So throughout my pregnancy, again, I was really lucky with continuity of care with our community midwife, but they didn't have a dedicated home birth team. So whereas with our first birth, we felt a pretty high degree of confidence that if we rang and said we were in labour, that the home birth team would be able to attend. This time it was a lot more, or we often don't have availability, and if it's on a Sunday evening, we basically don't do home births, and so there was a lot more uncertainty around that, which was challenging. Not to say the individuals we were engaging with weren't incredibly supportive, but they were rightly setting our expectations around the likelihood of different scenarios.
Yeah. And so can you talk us through the beginning stages of labour? So how did labour show up with your second?
Yeah, so he kept us on our toes. So about 38 and a half weeks, I had a false start, which was like a very dramatic false start. I was in the pool, I was having contractions, we had midwives there, we literally thought this was it. And they did an examination and they were like, yeah, you're 5+ centimeters. And then it just all stopped. I think essentially what happened was he just wasn't in the right position. So some really great midwives came and like helped me do some like yoga and different exercises to try and move him, and just were like, take the pressure off and we'll probably be back tomorrow. And they weren't back for over a week. So it was a really hard like week period where I was kind of getting these really regular bouts of contractions, but never like getting to that next level up. So like it was uncomfortable, and I was definitely having contractions, but I wasn't like getting into the, like that next stage of labour.
So did your waters break?
No,
No. So which is why there was no, I guess, like issue as such, because there's no
exactly.
infection risk. Well, that was
Yeah,
lucky.
yeah, that was really lucky. I mean, with both my labours, my waters broke really close to the boys being born. Like
Ah,
I was quite unusual. So with my first, it was like an hour and a bit before, and with my second, it was literally 10 minutes before. So my
wow. That
waters
must
went
be
really,
weird.
really, yeah, yeah. With the second, I was in the pool when the waters broke, and I remember saying like, I think they've just gone, and they're like, yeah, they've definitely just gone. So yeah,
So talk me through how you're feeling then. So you've kind of, you're at 5 centimeters. You must be thinking, cool, I'm in active labor. Then it all stops
yeah.
and you have to go about your regular life. How long did it take before it really kicked in again? And where was your head at that point?
It was really tough mentally, like really, really hard mentally. And I think there was a lot of times I was like, look, if I go in and say I'm feeling tired, I've got reduced movements, I kind of knew that they would be happy to induce me, but kind of said that. So it was
Mm.
at times really tempting to just be like, I'm so fed up, I'm so uncomfortable. Um, but I had lots of family supporting me, and like, you just do what you need to do, and lots of help with my eldest, which meant that I could like relax. And I think I just kept trying to like listen to my body, and we were obviously cautious, like making sure that I was feeling lots of movements and things like that. But every midwife who I spoke to and who came and saw me, or I went in for my appointments, was saying everything looks really good in terms of obs, and that kind of gave us the confidence to kind of keep holding on to the hope that we might be able to have that home birth.
Were you acting in those days as if you were in labor? Like, were you kind of step walking or were you just like carrying on your regular life?
Um, I tried as much as possible to carry on my regular life. There was definitely points where I got fed up and was like, right, I'm going to get this going, and I'm going to have my, you know, sage candle burning and step walk up and down the stairs and all of this. But I didn't do that much. I tried as
Yeah.
much as possible to do like things like batch cooking and just
Yeah.
around the house. And so I wasn't acting normally because I wasn't working. I was kind of taking it easy, but I was trying to stay in like a positive, it will happen when it will happen, my body knows what it's doing kind of mindset.
So
um
then talk us through the grand
yeah,
event.
so I woke up at like 5 a.m. and had like a series of contractions, and I said to you, and if this is not it, we're going in later. Luckily it was it, and he was born at kind of midday that day. So the actual kind of very intense bit of labor was much shorter, only about sort of six hours, I suppose.
Of the active labour, because I guess you were in active labour at 5 centimetres anyway.
Yeah, of the bit which I would consider active, because I guess in those
Yeah.
weeks there were periods where I was kind of having to maybe stop what I was doing through the contractions, but I was able to continue pottering. So the kind of the bit where I was like in labour land, I suppose, but I wasn't able to do anything else, was only that kind of 5 to 6 hours.
Gotcha.
So we called the midwives about 9 a.m. and they came, and I was in the pool and it was all kind of going in the right way. And about 11 o'clock, my contractions are spaced out a little bit, and the midwife said to me, everything's fine, you're doing really well. If you want to speed things up, you could try like getting out and walking around a bit. And I was kind of starting to get a bit fed up, I suppose, and recognized that things had seemed to slow down a bit in the last sort of 20 minutes. So I got out of the pool and went for a walk, and that like massively ramped things up. And he was kind of born just after midday. I don't know, kind of, I don't have like a specific bit which was transition. When I was walking around, I remember the contractions were getting really, really intense and finding them really hard, and sort of saying like, I'm getting back in the pool, this is too hard out of the pool. So I guess that would have been around transition. And I was sick as well, which was similar to the first. And then similarly kind of the pushing started, and I remember saying like, this is it, like I remember this from last time, this is the pushing feeling. My water's broken. He was kind of born a lot more traditionally, I suppose, in that his head was born, and then I had like what felt like a really long gap between the next contraction and then his body coming. But I would say similarly to the first, I didn't necessarily feel like I had to force myself to push. It was kind of that kind of feeling.
Wow. So what position were you in when you birthed him? Do you remember?
I was in the pool on my knees.
Was that the same with your first?
Yes, although with my first, once his head was out, I kind of sat back a bit, and then he came, but I stayed kind of more leaning forward and upright with my second.
And so do you think with the second you had a similar like fetal ejection reflex, again, like not really having to, try is the wrong word, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was a lot more conscious of it with my second, and I think I remember having to push a bit more for his head, and I remember that really long gap in between the head and the body, and like actively thinking, okay, I'm going to push with the next contraction for the body. But I didn't have kind of coached pushing, and I don't think I could have stopped my body from pushing if I tried to. I guess it was more just being more conscious of it.
And in terms of pain management for your second birth, you mentioned first birth you had nothing. So was second birth the same?
Yeah. I used a comb for my second birth, which I actually really liked. And I sort of our birth preferences said that if I wanted gas and air, I would have it, but I just didn't ask for it, I guess, in the moment.
You might not know this, but do they offer any other types of pain management at a home birth? Do they offer pethidine or anything like that, or is it literally just gas and air? And
yeah, they can do. I think you'd have to check with your individual trust, but there are sort of injectable pain relief which they can offer. I remember with my first, they told me to take paracetamol, but I don't think that did anything. And I think most women say that, but they did encourage me to take paracetamol.
It feels laughable in those moments, isn't it?
Yeah,
it'll help it. How?
Yeah.
So your second son is born. How did you feel? Did you know that he was a boy?
Yeah, we knew he was a boy. I felt, quite spaced out after him being born. I think it took me a little while to come back around to the room, but was able to spend quite a long time in the pool, which was really lovely. So we had about half an hour in the pool just for two of us, and that was really special. I was quite hungry and just quite tired after that, so kind of got out and had a flapjack and just a lie down on the sofa, really, in a bit of a relax whilst they sort of checked us all over. My placenta still hadn't come, and I wasn't having contractions, and they were starting to get a bit nervous about that, I suppose. They rang and let the midwives know, because I think they want it to be born within an hour. So they rang at the hour point and said it still hasn't come, and I think the hospital were basically saying to them, we would really like it to come, otherwise you're going to have to transfer her. So I remember saying, like, I'd like to just set up breastfeeding, because sometimes that can bring the placenta on. So I tried breastfeeding and it still didn't. So after about an hour and 20, it had the injection, which brought on like these really, really intense contractions, which were really horrible. And I think when you're having contractions and you're waiting to meet your baby, you're like, this is like a productive pain, and like I'm going to meet my baby. And when it's for placenta, I didn't have any mental capacity to see it as anything positive at that point. So I found that really hard, and they had to kind of jiggle the cord and give it a bit of a pull, and it was just a bit stubborn coming out. So nothing kind of medically was wrong. I didn't have a big postpartum bleed or anything like that, but it was quite a tough sort of 20 minutes or so with the midwives kind of really working with me and having to like support quite a lot to get the placenta out.
And then how were you in terms of like stitches or any grazes or cuts? Were you okay?
I was absolutely fine, yeah.
God, so nothing second time around. That's so lucky.
Second time around, yeah. It was amazing. And it made like the biggest difference postpartum, because I think, although I've said, you know, mentally I was really well, and you know, I think generally both times have enjoyed having a newborn. The first time, like, it was really uncomfortable sitting, and like it was really painful going to the toilet and all of that, and like I couldn't just move in the way I normally would. Whereas like the second time round, having not had stitches, I was kind of up and about and felt a lot more normal in myself a lot quicker.
So would you say then, what was an easier postpartum experience now that you've had the two?
Oh, just so different, because when you have another little one, when you have your second, you have the joy of your first meeting your second, but you also have the added kind of emotional management of your first, and the like logistics and all of that. So I think they were hard and easy in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was your breastfeeding journey with your second? Did you choose to breastfeed again? And
yeah, I'm still breastfeeding him now. Have been lucky both times from that respect. I was really conscious that having breastfed before didn't mean I was going to be able to this time, and they are really different in every way, but how they feed is really different. And so that's been quite a big adjustment. And I think feeding, you're prepared second time around through the time investment, but I was also really conscious of the impact that might have on my eldest, who actually was completely amazing, but we spent quite a lot of time, my husband and I, talking about how to manage that bit. If I was going to have to spend the hours you have to spend sitting and feeding, what that then meant for the rest of the family.
And I have a personal question on this, which is the 3-year age gap, because you've got two boys, I've got two boys. Mine are 2 years.
Okay.
Almost exactly 2 years and 2 weeks. And I'm just curious to know what a 3-year age gap is like if I was to have another baby. So can you talk us through what that journey's been like?
Yeah, I mean, I think overwhelmingly positive. I think at 3, he really understood and was really excited. He went to nursery in the morning and then was picked up and brought home to a baby. So I think from that perspective, it kind of had quite a little impact on his world.
Yeah.
The actual birth bit, which was incredible. It was one of the things I was most worried about. It's like, what do I do? I mean, you've got two, you probably have the same. What do I do with my eldest whilst I'm giving birth? Yeah. So that bit all went really smoothly. He was really caring and like got up at like 5 a.m. every morning for a week to sit and cuddle the baby, which was very cute, and kind of was old enough to do things like, oh, could you pass mummy the wet wipes, or like, oh, baby, sing a song, and all of that sort of thing, which was really lovely. I think now in the last sort of 6 months or so, the sharing has been really challenging, but I suspect that's not an age gap thing, that's a sibling thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's generally been really positive, and it's been that nice sort of spot of he understands enough that it's not like a complete overhaul of his world, and he can kind of participate. And yeah, they're just quite sweet together now, really.
And they get along quite well?
Yes, my youngest is very much in his mind stage, which is, I think I remember from first time around, but when you have one, it's easier because it really is theirs. But yeah, so that's slightly challenging, but generally they're each other's favourite person, I think. So that's really nice.
And you don't have to answer this question, but do you have any hopes to expand the family, or do you think you're good at 2?
I think we're probably good at 2. I think, life's pretty hectic with 2, and there's a lot of sort of wider considerations around practicalities, aren't there? But yeah, we love being parents, and I don't think we've 100% ruled it out.
Yeah. And then in regards to home birth, I think it's so good that I've had you on, because there's not many women now that have the experience of an NHS home birth. So could you talk through any like tips or advice of anyone who is wanting to do a home birth for the first birth, who maybe doesn't have the funds to do it privately or just would like to do it through the NHS, and what you would recommend that they do? I think it is, as you would know, probably more challenging now. Just, I think it's harder to get midwives to do it. So if there's anything that you found that was really helpful, please share.
Yeah, I think knowing what's important to you, however you want to birth your baby, is like the biggest piece of advice I would give. And it can be small and big things. But I think having a think about what's most important to you and being able to vocalize that as early as possible. I think one of the things I found when I was initially exploring having a home birth was there's perhaps a misconception, both from NHS staff, but also other people who you might talk to, that it's quite an extreme option. And I would really encourage anyone who's looking at a home birth not to feel like they have to be all or nothing. So like I had the injection both times of the placenta, and a lot of people who have a home birth would say, oh, well, you can't have anything to do with medicine, or there might be this perception that if because you're having a home birth, you're rejecting all like medical intervention. But I think embracing that kind of grey area and saying like, well, this is my preference, but I also recognise that sometimes these things are needed. And having that conversation with the medical staff, I found really helpful, because I think it softened how they approached us. And I think it's a perhaps quite a pragmatic view. Like the midwives were very concerned about availability and what we would do if there wasn't a midwife available. And it was our birth plan was, or preferences were always, we wouldn't choose to free birth, that if available we would go into the birth ed centre. And like even having those discussions, I found really changed the tone of the how we were then treated by the NHS staff, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah.
So I think anything you can do to destigmatize your own view and the people who you're surrounding yourself with around the kind of black and white nature of home birth, you know, you can have whatever you kind of want in terms of medical support and a home birth within the realms of what's possible at home, obviously.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then do you have a kind of resource or anything that you found most helpful in your birth or parenting journey that you want to share?
I think my husband probably would be the top of my list. I think having a supportive birth partner who like knows what you are hoping to achieve, who's kind of bought into that, who's kind of supporting you, who will advocate for you, who's got the same kind of vision as you, is like invaluable. I think both in parenting and in birth, but I think that was hugely helpful. And I think kind of being seen as a team as well. I think in terms of like physical resources, my favorite book was Do Birth by Caroline Flint, which is like a really small, tiny little.
Don't know that one.
It's like a little tiny book. There's one picture in it, which is like a mum sat in bed with her baby, and like particularly with my second pregnancy and birth, that was like my picture. That was like, I just want to be in my bed with my baby. Like that was my kind of, you know, you kind of what you're hoping for. So that was probably my favorite book, but there's so many out there. And like I think what you're doing is amazing, because I think I listened to and read as many birth stories as I could, and I think that's just hugely helpful, because it kind of prepares you that there's so many different ways things can go. And I think positive and less positive births aren't always about what happened, it's about how you're made to feel. And there's things you can kind of do to, if you know what's important to you and you can vocalize that, then hopefully however your birth plays out, you can look back at it and think, well, even if it's not what I planned, it was positive. So I think birth stories are hugely helpful, and I think it's amazing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been lovely to have you on, Hannah. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Well, thanks for having me, and all the best.
I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. And just a reminder, if you have any friends that would like to share their birth story, please do send it in. Or if you're listening and think that you have a birth story you want to share, please do send it in. I'd love to hear it. You can do so via my contact form on my website, which is britishbirthingstories.com. Or you can head to one of my social pages on Instagram or TikTok and get in touch with me there. It's also British Birthing Stories. And if you haven't done so already and you're loving the show, please do subscribe and follow the show on whichever podcasting app you're on. It makes such a difference and helps get me out there so that I can share more of these stories to you each week. Thanks, and see you next week.